The howling wind carried death on its breath as Knox O'Leary clutched his 5-year-old daughter Emma closer to his chest. Her burning forehead pressed against his neck as they battled through the worst blizzard Montana had seen in 30 years. His horse, Thunder, trudged forward with each labored step, the animal's strength waning just as Knox's hope threatened to collapse beneath the weight of his fear. "Just a little further, Emma girl," he whispered, his words immediately stolen by the shrieking wind. "Papa's going to get you to the doctor." It was 1878, and the small homestead Knox had built 15 miles outside of Bitterroot, Montana, had never felt so isolating as it did when Emma's fever had spiked that morning. With his nearest neighbor 5 miles away and Emma delirious with fever, Knox had no choice but to make for town and Dr. Porter the only physician within 50 miles. "Mama," Emma murmured against his chest, her voice so faint Knox barely heard it. "Mama's watching over you from heaven," he answered, the familiar ache of Catherine's absence squeezing his heart. 3 years since childbed fever had taken her, leaving Knox to raise their newborn daughter alone. "She's sending us help, you'll see." Thunder stumbled, nearly sending them both into a snowdrift. Knox righted himself, adjusting Emma's blanket-wrapped form in his arms. The town was still 8 miles away and the light was fading fast. The temperature was dropping with the sun, and Knox knew they wouldn't survive the night exposed to the elements. Through the curtain of white, Knox spotted a faint yellow glow. A light. A house where there shouldn't be one, at least not one he remembered. Homesteads were sparse in this part of Montana, and Knox knew every family within 20 miles. "Thank God," he breathed, steering Thunder toward the light. As they drew closer, the outline of a small cabin took shape. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth inside. Knox had never seen anything so beautiful. He practically fell from his saddle when they reached the porch, his legs numb from cold and fear. Somehow, he managed to keep Emma secure in his arms as he staggered to the door. He pounded with a fist that had long since lost feeling. "Help." He called, his voice cracking. "Please, I need help." The door swung open, revealing a woman with dark hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She wore a simple dress with the sleeves rolled up, and her hands were red from hot water. Her eyes, the color of spring violets, widened at the sight of Knox and the child in his arms. "My daughter's sick," Knox said, desperation making his voice rough. "I need to get her to the doctor in Bitterroot, but the storm, bring her inside," the woman commanded, stepping back from the doorway. Her voice carried authority that brooked no argument. "Quickly." Knox obeyed, ducking through the doorframe and into the blessed warmth of the cabin. The interior was modest but tidy, a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, and a curtained-off area that presumably led to a sleeping space. "Put her on my bed," the woman said, pulling back the curtain to reveal a neat bed with a patchwork quilt. "And then see to your horse. There's a small lean-to out back that will give him some shelter." Knox hesitated, reluctant to leave Emma with a stranger. The woman's expression softened slightly. "I'm Zanna Vance. I'm a doctor, or I was training to be before," she stopped herself. "Your daughter is in good hands. I promise you that." "A woman doctor." The words escaped before Knox could stop them. One eyebrow arched sharply. "Would you prefer your daughter's care be delayed while you ride another 8 miles through a blizzard to find a man with the same training I have?" Knox laid Emma gently on the bed. "No, madam," he said, properly chastened. "I'll see to Thunder." By the time Knox returned from settling his horse, stamping snow from his boots on the porch and shaking it from his coat, Zanna had removed Emma's outer clothes and was pressing a cool cloth to the child's forehead. A kettle steamed on the stove, and various jars and bottles sat on the table. "How is she?" Knox asked, his hat clutched in his hands. "The fever is high," Zanna said, not looking up from her patient. "How long has she been ill?" "Started yesterday with a cough. This morning she was burning up, couldn't keep anything down." Knox stepped closer, watching his daughter's small chest rise and fall with each labored breath. I tried cool compresses, but the fever kept climbing. Zanna nodded, her focus unwavering as she examined Emma's throat and chest. Her lungs are congested. I'm concerned about pneumonia. She glanced up at Knox, taking in his haggard appearance. What's your name? Knox O'Leary. I have a homestead about 7 miles east of here. Well, Mr. O'Leary, you were right to seek help, but you and your daughter won't be going anywhere tonight. She nodded toward the window, where snow continued to fall in thick curtains. This storm isn't letting up anytime soon. Knox ran a hand through his hair. I can't impose, it's not an imposition when it's a matter of life and death, Zanna interrupted firmly. I need to prepare some remedies, and your daughter needs constant care tonight. You can help me by filling that basin with fresh snow. For the next several hours, Knox followed Zanna's instructions, fetching water, stoking the fire, and watching in amazement as she worked. Her hands moved with confident precision as she mixed herbal concoctions and prepared poultices. She spoke softly to Emma, her voice soothing as she coaxed the little girl to swallow medicinal tea. You're good with children, Knox observed as midnight approached. Emma had finally fallen into a more peaceful sleep, her breathing less labored than before. Zanna's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. I've had practice. She didn't elaborate, and Knox didn't press. Where did you learn medicine? He asked instead, accepting the cup of coffee she offered him. Philadelphia, the Women's Medical College. She sat in the rocking chair, cradling her own cup between her palms. I was nearly finished with my training when my father fell ill. I came home to care for him, to Montana. She shook her head. To Idaho originally. After he passed, I decided to make a fresh start. I've been here about 6 months. Knox glanced around the small cabin, practicing medicine, trying to. A rueful smile touched her lips. The good people of Bitterroot aren't entirely convinced a woman can be trusted with their ailments. I managed to treat some of the women and children, and a few of the miners who can't afford to be particular. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the cabin's windows. Zanna rose to check on Emma, placing a gentle hand on the child's forehead. Her fever's coming down, she reported, relief evident in her voice. The worst danger may be past, but we'll need to watch her carefully through the night. I can't thank you enough, Knox said, his voice rough with emotion. If you hadn't been here, but I was, Zanna said simply. She returned to the rocking chair, studying Knox in the firelight. Where is your wife, Mr. O'Leary? Emma asked for her mother earlier. The familiar pain settled in Knox's chest. She died, childbed fever, right after Emma was born. Zanna's eyes softened with understanding. I'm sorry, that must have been difficult. It was the hardest thing I've ever faced, Knox admitted, staring into the fire. Still is some days. But Emma gives me reason to keep going. You've done well with her, Zanna observed. She's a sweet child and clearly adores her father. Knox smiled faintly. She's my whole world. As the night deepened, they took turns watching over Emma. Knox insisted Zanna get some rest, offering to wake her if Emma's condition changed. She reluctantly agreed, settling on a pallet near the fire while Knox sat vigil by his daughter's bedside. In the quiet hours before dawn, as Knox watched his daughter's peaceful sleep, he found his gaze drawn repeatedly to the woman sleeping by the hearth. Her dark hair spilled across her makeshift pillow, and her face, relaxed in sleep, looked younger and more vulnerable than it had when she was tending to Emma with such fierce competence. There was a story there, Knox thought. A woman doctor, alone in the wilderness of Montana Territory. He wondered what had really brought her to this isolated spot, so far from civilization and medical practice. But as the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, revealing a world transformed into a pristine white wonderland, Knox was simply grateful for whatever circumstances had placed Dr. Zanna Vance in his path when he needed her most. Emma's fever broke with the new day. She woke asking for water, her eyes clearer than they'd been in days. Knox nearly wept with relief when she managed a small smile. You're feeling better, little one? Zanna asked, kneeling beside the bed. Emma nodded shyly. My chest doesn't hurt so much. That's wonderful news. Zanna placed a cool hand on Emma's forehead. Still a slight fever, but much improved. Are you an angel? Emma asked suddenly, her blue eyes so like her mother's studying Zanna's face intently. Zanna laughed, the sound bright in the small cabin. No, sweetheart, I'm a doctor. Ladies can't be doctors, Emma stated with the certainty of a 5-year-old. This lady is, Knox interjected, giving his daughter a gentle look of reproach. And we're very fortunate she is, or you might still be very sick. Emma considered this, her small brow furrowed, like Mama was sick. Knox's heart clenched. No, not exactly like Mama. He smoothed back Emma's tangled blonde hair. You had a different kind of sickness, but Dr. Vance knew just how to make you better. Can she make other people better too, like Mrs. Peterson's baby? Knox exchanged a glance with Zanna. Their nearest neighbors, the Petersons, were expecting their 3rd child any day. I'm sure Dr. Vance helps many people, Knox said carefully. Not as many as I'd like, Zanna admitted, rising to fetch a cup of willow bark tea for Emma. But yes, I can help with babies too. Could you have helped my mama? Emma's innocent question hung in the air. Knox saw the flash of pain in Zanna's eyes before she masked it with professional composure. I would have tried very hard, she said quietly, helping Emma sit up to drink the tea. Sometimes, though, even doctors can't stop certain sicknesses. The storm had passed, leaving behind 3 feet of pristine snow and a sky of flawless blue. After breakfast, a simple but hearty affair of cornmeal mush, sweetened with the last of Zanna's molasses, Knox ventured outside to check on Thunder and assess their chances of traveling. The cold bit at his exposed skin as he trudged through the snow to the lean-to where Thunder had spent the night. The horse nickered a greeting, seemingly recovered from yesterday's ordeal. We got lucky, boy, Knox murmured, running a hand along Thunder's neck. Don't know what would have happened if we hadn't found this place. When Knox returned to the cabin, he found Emma sitting at the table, wrapped in a quilt and chatting animatedly while Zanna checked her heartbeat with a stethoscope. And Papa says I can have my own pony when I'm 7 if I'm responsible enough, Emma was saying. I'm already responsible. I feed the chickens all by myself. That is very responsible, Zanna agreed solemnly. What kind of pony would you like? A spotted one like in the picture book. Emma looked up as Knox entered. Papa, Dr. Zanna has been all over the world. She's been to Philadelphia. That's not quite all over the world, sweetheart, Zanna corrected with a smile, but it is quite different from Montana. How is she? Knox asked. Much improved. The fever's almost gone and her lungs sound clearer. Zanna removed the stethoscope from her ears. I'd still like her to rest today. The trails won't be passable until tomorrow at the earliest, anyway. Knox nodded, relieved yet also strangely reluctant to contemplate leaving. I should compensate you for your time and supplies, he said, reaching for the money pouch he kept in his inner coat pocket. Zanna waved away the offer. That's not necessary. I insist, Knox said firmly. You've saved my daughter's life. That's worth more than I could ever repay. A slight flush colored Zanna's cheeks. Then consider it an investment. When you reach town, you can tell people where you received treatment. Word of mouth is the best advertisement a doctor can have in these parts. I'll do better than that, Knox promised. I'll make sure everyone for 50 miles knows there's a fine doctor here who doesn't turn away patients in need, regardless of the weather. Zanna's smile was warm enough to chase away the last of the winter chill. I would appreciate that. As the day progressed, Emma's strength returned gradually. By mid-afternoon, she was restless enough to want to get out of bed, though still too weak for much activity. Zanna produced a deck of playing cards and they taught Emma how to play simple games at the table. The little girl's laughter filled the cabin, a sound Knox hadn't realized how desperately he'd missed until he heard it again. Knox found himself watching Zanna as much as his daughter. There was a gentleness in her that contrasted with her brisk, no-nonsense approach to medicine. When she smiled, really smiled, not the polite curve of lips she often displayed, it transformed her face, bringing a spark to her violet eyes that made something in Knox's chest tighten inexplicably. That evening, after Emma had been tucked back into Zanna's bed, Knox helped with the dinner preparations. The domestic scene felt strangely comfortable. Knox chopping vegetables while Zanna tended a pot of stew, the easy rhythm of shared work reminding him of what he'd lost when Catherine died. "You're quiet," Zanna observed as they sat down to eat. Knox shrugged. "Just thinking. About your wife." Her perception was uncanny, in a way. Knox met her gaze across the table. "About how a home feels different when it's not just you and a child." Understanding flickered in Zanna's eyes. "It must be difficult raising Emma alone." "It is," Knox acknowledged, "but we manage. She's worth every hardship. She's fortunate to have you." Zanna's voice softened. "Not all children are so lucky in their fathers." The statement hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Knox sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. Instead, he asked, "Why Bitterroot? Of all places to set up a practice, why choose such a remote location?" Zanna was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "After my father died, I needed to go somewhere. Uncomplicated. Somewhere I could practice medicine without." She trailed off. "Without what?" "Without certain expectations." She met his gaze steadily. "In Philadelphia, there were expectations about who I should marry, how I should practice, what kind of doctor I should be. And those expectations didn't align with your plans," Knox surmised. A sad smile touched her lips. "Let's just say I disappointed several people by choosing to head west instead of accepting a certain marriage proposal." "His loss," Knox said simply. Zanna's eyebrows rose in surprise and then she laughed softly. "That's a refreshingly straightforward perspective, Mr. O'Leary." "Knox," he corrected. "I think after sharing your home and saving my daughter's life, you can call me Knox." "Knox, then." She said his name carefully, as if testing the sound of it. "And I suppose you should call me Zanna, since we're being informal." "Zanna," he repeated, liking the way it felt on his tongue. "It's a beautiful name. It's short for Susanna. My mother was the only one who ever called me Zanna." Her expression grew distant. "She died when I was 12. That's when I decided I wanted to be a doctor. To save other mothers," she nodded. "Something like that, though I've learned we can't save everyone, no matter how much we might wish to." They fell into a comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and Emma's soft breathing from behind the curtain. Outside, the temperature dropped again, and frost patterns began forming on the windows. "You should take the rocking chair tonight," Zanna said as they cleared away the dishes. "It's more comfortable than the floor." "I couldn't put you out of your bed 2 nights in a row," Knox protested. "Your daughter is in my bed," Zanna pointed out reasonably. "And I'm quite accustomed to the pallet. I often fall asleep by the fire when I'm working late." Knox wanted to argue further, but the determined set of her jaw suggested it would be futile. Instead, he helped her prepare for the night, banking the fire and filling the water bucket for morning. As he settled into the rocking chair, watching Zanna arrange her palette, Knox was struck by how quickly she had come to seem essential not just to Emma's recovery, but to the peaceful feeling that had settled over him despite the circumstances that had brought them here. "Zanna," he said quietly as she was about to extinguish the lamp. She looked up, her face half in shadow. "Yes, thank you, not just for Emma but for—" He gestured vaguely, unable to articulate exactly what he meant, but she seemed to understand. "You're welcome, Knox," she said softly and blew out the light. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Emma woke early, her cheeks pink with health rather than fever, demanding breakfast and asking when they could go home to check on her chickens. "Soon, Emma girl," Knox promised, relief flooding through him at her obvious recovery. "We need to make sure the trails are clear enough for Thunder to manage." "I don't want to leave," Emma declared, spooning up her breakfast. "I like it here. Dr. Zanna tells better stories than you do, Papa." Knox feigned offense. "Is that so? She knows stories about ladies who do important things, not just cowboys and outlaws." Zanna laughed as she packed a small bundle of medicinal herbs. "Your father's stories are probably more exciting than mine," she told Emma. But perhaps he could learn a few about remarkable women too. I'm always willing to learn, Knox said, meeting Zanna's eyes with a smile that made her cheeks flush slightly. After breakfast, Knox ventured outside to assess the conditions. The sun sparkled on the snow-covered landscape, and the air was crisp and clean. The main trail would likely be passable by midday as the sun continued to melt the top layer of snow. When he returned to the cabin, he found Emma helping Zanna fold linens, the two of them chatting like old friends. We should be able to head home this afternoon, Knox announced, though the words brought an unexpected pang. The trail's starting to clear. Emma's face fell. Do we have to go? Yes, sweetheart, we've imposed on Dr. Vance long enough. You could visit again, Zanna suggested, then quickly added, for a check-up to make sure Emma's lungs are clear, in a week or so. We'd like that, Knox said, perhaps too eagerly. Wouldn't we, Emma? Emma nodded enthusiastically. Can we bring cookies, Mrs.? Peterson gave us a recipe for molasses cookies that are really good. Cookies would be lovely, Zanna said with a smile. As the morning passed and the time for departure grew closer, Knox found himself creating reasons to delay. He chopped extra firewood for Zanna, checked and rechecked Thunder's tack, and carefully packed the medicines Zanna had prepared for Emma. Finally, there was nothing left to do but leave. Knox helped Emma into her coat and wrapped her in an extra blanket that Zanna insisted they take. The ride home will be cold, she said, tucking the blanket securely around Emma. Keep her bundled up and make sure she drinks plenty of fluids when you get home. I will, Knox promised, settling his hat on his head. Zanna, wait, she interrupted, turning to fetch something from a shelf. Take this. She pressed a small book into his hands. For Emma, it's a collection of stories about women explorers and scientists. I thought she might enjoy it. Knox looked down at the well-worn volume. We can't take your book, please, Zanna insisted. I've read it so many times I practically know it by heart, and Emma should know that girls can grow up to be anything they want, even doctors. Knox swallowed hard against the unexpected emotion rising in his throat. Thank you. He lifted Emma onto Thunder's back, then turned to Zanna one last time. She stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself against the cold, her dark hair lifting slightly in the breeze. 1 week, Knox said. We'll be back to check in with you. I'll look forward to it, Zanna replied, and the smile she gave him warmed Knox all the way home. True to his word, Knox returned to Zanna's cabin exactly 1 week later. Emma rode her own pony, a gentle old mare named Buttercup, proudly carrying a basket of molasses cookies covered with a checkered cloth. Knox had spent more time than he cared to admit preparing for the visit, bathing, trimming his beard and wearing his best, and only, clean shirt. Zanna's face lit up when she opened the door to find them on her porch. You came, she exclaimed, then quickly composed herself. I mean, right on schedule. Excellent. Papa says punctuality is a virtue, Emma informed her seriously, offering the basket of cookies. We made these ourselves. Well, Papa did most of the work, but I helped stir. They look delicious, Zanna said, ushering them inside. I've just made tea if you'd like some. The cabin seemed even more welcoming than Knox remembered. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with a pleasant, medicinal scent. A new quilt adorned the rocking chair, and fresh-cut pine branches in a jar added a touch of greenery to the winter surroundings. As Zanna examined Emma, declaring her lungs clear and her health fully restored, Knox found himself studying the doctor's deft movements and gentle manner. Her hands were capable but elegant, her voice soothing as she explained to Emma how the stethoscope worked. Can I listen to Papa's heart? Emma asked eagerly. Zanna glanced at Knox, a question in her eyes. He nodded, and she showed Emma how to place the stethoscope properly. His heart's beating really fast, Emma observed innocently. Knox felt heat rise to his face as Zanna's eyes met his over Emma's head, a hint of amusement in their violet depths. Sometimes hearts do that, Zanna said softly, not looking away from Knox, when they're excited about something. The visit stretched from the intended hour to the entire afternoon. They shared the cookies with tea, and Zanna showed Emma her collection of medicinal plants, explaining what each one was used for. Knox helped repair a loose floorboard near the stove, glad to have some small way to repay her kindness. As the short winter day began to fade toward evening, Knox reluctantly announced it was time to head home before darkness fell. "But we just got here," Emma protested. "We've been here for hours, little one," Knox reminded her gently. "You must come again," Zanna said, helping Emma into her coat. "Perhaps, next Sunday?" The invitation hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Knox felt something unfamiliar flutter in his chest, hope, perhaps, or the beginnings of something he'd thought was lost to him forever. Sunday would be perfect, he said, and so began a pattern that carried them through the harsh Montana winter. Each Sunday, Knox and Emma would make the journey to Zanna's cabin, arriving with small gifts: a jar of preserved peaches, a hand-carved wooden box for her herbs, a new blanket Emma had helped stitch for Zanna's bed. With each visit, Knox found himself lingering longer, reluctant to leave the warmth of Zanna's company. They shared stories of their lives: Knox's childhood in Boston, his journey west after meeting Catherine, the struggles and joys of homesteading, Zanna's privileged upbringing in Philadelphia, her battle to be taken seriously as a medical student, her father's illness that had brought her back west just before she could complete her formal training. "Do you regret it?" Knox asked one evening in late February as they sat by the fire while Emma dozed on Zanna's bed. "Not finishing your degree?" Zanna considered the question, her face thoughtful in the firelight. "I regret not having the paper that says I'm qualified," she said finally. "But I don't regret coming home to be with my father in his final days, and I don't regret coming here." Her eyes met his. "Especially now." The unspoken sentiment hung between them, as tangible as touch. Knox found himself leaning toward her, drawn by something stronger than conscious thought. "Zanna," he began, his voice low. "I know it hasn't been very long, but I feel..." The sound of hooves pounding outside the cabin interrupted him. Zanna jumped to her feet as someone pounded urgently on the door. "Dr. Vance," a man's voice called. "Are you there? It's Bill Peterson." "Martha's having the baby and something's wrong." The peaceful moment shattered as Zanna sprang into action, gathering her medical bag and barking instructions to Knox. "I need to go," she said, pulling on her coat and heavy boots. "Martha's time wasn't due for another 2 weeks, and if Bill says something's wrong, I'll come with you," Knox said immediately, already reaching for his own coat. "Emma will be fine here. She's asleep and we won't be gone long." Knox's tone brooked no argument. "You might need help, and I won't let you ride out there alone in the dark." Zanna hesitated only a moment before nodding sharply. "Thank you." They rode hard through the moonlit night, following Bill Peterson's frantic lead. The Peterson homestead was only 3 miles from Zanna's cabin, but in the dark, with patches of ice still on the trail, the journey seemed endless. Martha Peterson lay on her bed, her face gray with pain when they arrived. Zanna took charge immediately, ordering hot water and clean linens, sending Bill outside with Knox after a quick examination revealed the problem. "The baby's turned wrong," she explained tersely. "I need to try to turn it, or neither mother nor child will survive." Knox spent the next 2 hours pacing the Petersons' porch with Bill, listening to the man's prayers mingling with Martha's occasional cries from inside. When the thin wail of a newborn finally pierced the night, both men sagged with relief. Zanna emerged sometime later, exhausted but triumphant. "A healthy boy," she announced, "and Martha will recover fully with proper rest." Bill broke down in tears, clasping Zanna's hands in his. "How can I ever repay you, Doc?" "By spreading the word that Bitterroot has a competent physician," she said simply. "That's all the payment I need." As they rode back to Zanna's cabin in the pre-dawn light, Knox could not contain his admiration. "You were magnificent," he told her. "What you did for Martha and that baby, it's what any doctor would have done." Zanna said, though her weary face showed pride at the compliment. Not any doctor could have done what you did, Knox insisted. You saved 2 lives tonight. When they reached the cabin, Emma was still sleeping soundly, unaware of the drama that had unfolded. Knox insisted on making breakfast while Zanna washed up, and they shared a quiet meal as the sun began to rise. What you were going to say earlier, Zanna said suddenly, setting down her coffee cup. Before Bill arrived, Knox's heart quickened. Yes. I'd like to hear it now if you still want to say it. Knox took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I was going to say that I know it hasn't been very long, but I feel something for you that I never expected to feel again after Catherine died. He met her gaze steadily. I care for you, Zanna. Deeply, and I hope you might feel something similar. The silence that followed seemed endless. Then Zanna reached across the table and took his hand in hers. I do, she said simply. I've tried not to. I told myself it was too soon, that I barely know you. But the truth is, Knox O'Leary, you've awakened feelings in me that I wasn't sure I was capable of anymore. Joy surged through Knox, so intense it was almost painful. Where do we go from here? He asked. Zanna's smile was like the sunrise breaking through clouds. Forward, I hope. One step at a time. That spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. As the snow melted and the first green shoots appeared, Knox and Emma became fixtures at Zanna's cabin. Knox helped build an extension to serve as a proper examining room, while Emma appointed herself Zanna's assistant, learning to identify healing herbs and helping to prepare simple remedies. Word of Zanna's skill with Martha Peterson spread quickly through the surrounding homesteads. Soon, she was being called to attend births, set broken bones, and treat ailments throughout the area. Knox often accompanied her on these calls, proud to support her work in any way he could. Their courtship progressed with the deliberate care of 2 people who had known loss and understood the precious nature of second chances. They shared their first kiss on a mild April evening, standing among the wildflowers that had begun to carpet the meadow behind Zanna's cabin. I never thought I'd find this again, Knox confessed, his forehead resting against hers. After Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never thought I'd find it at all, Zanna replied. I'd resigned myself to being alone, married only to my work. And now? Her smile was radiant. Now I wonder if perhaps we can have both love and purpose. In early May, Knox took Zanna to see his homestead for the first time. The small but sturdy house he'd built with his own hands sat on a rise overlooking a creek, surrounded by good grazing land and a vegetable garden that was beginning to flourish under the spring sun. It's not much, he said, suddenly nervous as he helped her down from her horse. But the land is fertile, and I've been adding to the house bit by bit. Emma ran ahead, eager to show Zanna her chickens and the new calf that had been born just days before. It's wonderful, Zanna said, taking in the sweeping views of the mountains in the distance. You've built something beautiful here, Knox. It could be more beautiful still, he said carefully. With the right additions. Zanna turned to him, understanding dawning in her eyes. Knox, I'm not asking yet, he assured her quickly. I know it's too soon. But I wanted you to see what could be possible someday, if you wanted it. A doctor's wife living on a remote homestead. Zanna's tone was gently questioning. A doctor living wherever she chooses to practice, Knox corrected. With a husband who supports her work and a stepdaughter who already adores her. Tears shimmered in Zanna's eyes. You would truly support my continuing to practice medicine? Many men wouldn't. I'm not many men, Knox said simply. And I fell in love with you as you are a healer, a woman of science and compassion. I would never ask you to be less than what you are. Zanna's kiss was answer enough. The proposal, when it finally came in late June, was witnessed by Emma, who had been Knox's eager co-conspirator. They invited Zanna for a picnic by the creek, where Knox had carved a small wooden box containing a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a simple gold band set with a single small pearl. Zanna Vance, Knox said, kneeling before her as Emma watched with barely contained excitement. You came into our lives on the worst night of the worst storm, and you brought healing not just to Emma's body but to my heart. I love you for your strength, your compassion, your brilliance, and for 100 other reasons I discover new each day." He opened the box, revealing the ring. "Would you do us the honor of becoming my wife and Emma's mother? Say yes." Emma burst out, unable to contain herself any longer. "Please, please say yes." Zanna laughed through her tears, looking from father to daughter with such love it made Knox's heart swell almost painfully in his chest. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain. "Yes to both of you with all my heart." They were married in August in the small church in Bitterroot, with Emma serving as flower girl and maid of honor combined. The entire community turned out for the wedding of the homesteader and the woman doctor, who had proven her worth 100 times over since that fateful blizzard. The question of where they would live was resolved with typical practical ingenuity. They would split their time between the homestead and Zanna's cabin, which would continue to serve as her clinic. Knox added a room to the cabin for Emma and expanded the examining area to give Zanna more space to work. The best of both worlds, Zanna declared on their first night as husband and wife, as they lay together in the bedroom of Knox's now their home. "The peace of the homestead and the accessibility of the cabin for my patients. And a family that loves you in both places," Knox added, drawing her close. "I never imagined life could be this full," Zanna confessed, her head resting on his chest. "When I came west, I thought I was choosing a life of solitary purpose over love and family. And now I know I didn't have to choose at all." She raised herself on one elbow to look into his face. "Thank you for getting caught in that blizzard," Knox laughed softly. "That might be the first time anyone has thanked me for poor planning." "Not poor planning," Zanna corrected, settling back into his embrace. "Divine intervention. The years that followed brought challenges, as all lives do, but also immeasurable joy." Zanna's practice grew until she was recognized as the finest physician in the county, respected by even the most traditional of the local men. Knox expanded the homestead, adding cattle to his holdings and eventually building a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Emma thrived with Zanna's influence, developing a keen interest in both medicine and the natural world. By the time she was 12, she had already declared her intention to become a doctor like her stepmother, a goal both parents encouraged wholeheartedly. 2 years after their marriage, Zanna gave birth to a son they named James, after her father. 2 years later came another daughter, Catherine, named for the mother. Emma had never known a gesture that moved Knox to tears when Zanna suggested it. "Your first wife will always be part of who you are, who Emma is," Zanna told him. "I would never want to erase her memory." On the 5th anniversary of the blizzard that had brought them together, Knox and Zanna stood on the porch of their homestead, watching their children play in the yard. Emma, now 10, was teaching 5-year-old James and 3-year-old Catherine how to identify different bird calls. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if I hadn't gotten lost in that storm?" Knox asked, his arm around Zanna's waist. "Sometimes," Zanna admitted. "I might still be in that cabin alone, struggling to build a practice. You might have reached Dr. Porter in town," or she stopped, unwilling to voice the darker possibility. "Or Emma and I might not have survived the journey," Knox finished quietly. "Fate is a mysterious thing." "Not fate," Zanna corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "Love. Love guided you through that storm to my door. Love gave me the skills to help Emma. Love kept me from giving up on my dreams. And love brought us here," Knox said, gesturing to their home, their land, their family. "Yes." Zanna's smile held all the warmth and promise that had sustained them through the years. "Love brought us home." As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Knox O'Leary held his wife close and offered a silent prayer of gratitude for blizzards, brave women doctors, and second chances at love that came when least expected but most needed. In the 10 years that followed, The O'Leary family flourished in ways neither Knox nor Zanna could have imagined on that stormy night when fate first brought them together. Their homestead expanded to include a proper medical clinic adjacent to the main house, where Zanna treated patients from throughout the county. Knox's cattle ranch prospered, allowing them to send Emma to medical school in Philadelphia, when she turned 18, following in her stepmother's footsteps with the formal education Zanna herself had never completed. James grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's talent for working the land and his mother's compassionate spirit. Catherine, spirited and independent, developed an unexpected gift for mathematics, spending hours calculating figures for both the ranch's accounts and her mother's medical records. Their family expanded once more when Zanna, at 39, surprised everyone herself most of all by giving birth to another son they named Robert. The boy, arriving 10 years after Catherine, became the adored youngest sibling, doted on by his older brothers and sisters, and serving as a daily reminder of the enduring love between Knox and Zanna. On the 15th anniversary of the blizzard, the day they had come to celebrate, as the true beginning of their family, Knox presented Zanna with a special gift: the deed to a new building in Bitterroot, designated as the town's first proper hospital. "The Vance O'Leary Medical Center," he announced as Zanna opened the document with trembling hands. 15 beds, an operating theater, and living quarters for a resident physician. "Knox," Zanna whispered, overcome. "How the whole community contributed," Knox explained, pride evident in his voice. "Every family you've helped over the years, every baby you've delivered, every bone you've set, every fever you've broken, they all wanted to be part of this." It was, perhaps, the greatest validation of the life they had built together, a life that had begun in crisis, but had blossomed into something extraordinary through their shared commitment to healing, growth, and love. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, their youngest son asleep in Zanna's lap and letters from Emma at medical college on the table beside them, Knox reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I set out in a blizzard to find a doctor," he said, taking Zanna's free hand in his. "Instead, I found everything I never knew I needed." Zanna's smile, as warm and beautiful at 45 as it had been at 30, was his answer. "And I opened my door to find a desperate man and his sick child," she replied, "and discovered my future waiting on my doorstep." As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing one by one in the vast Montana sky, Knox O'Leary held his wife's hand and marveled at how a moment of desperate need had transformed into a lifetime of profound blessing, proving once again that sometimes the most treacherous storms lead us exactly where we need to be.